Good evening. Tonight is Wednesday, August 4th, and it sounds like somebody has their computer on. Can we start with a pledge, please? Thank you. Can I get a motion to open the meeting, please?
So
Can I get a second?
second.
Remember to mute and unmute or raise your hand, Corey, if you're okaying, not okaying. You still have to mute and unmute because we're using the Zooms tonight. So Corey motioned, Ally seconded, all in favor? Aye. All right, so we are now going to open the public hearing for the Code of Conduct. Does anybody have any comments on the Code of Conduct? All righty, then we're going to close the public hearing now for the Code of Conduct. And we will open the public hearing for the district-wide safety plan. Does anybody have any comments on the district-wide safety plan? Okay, then we can close the public hearing on the district-wide safety plan. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as stated, please?
So moved.
All in favor? This is kind of like a game show where you have to hit the button first. Does anybody have anything to pull from the consent agenda? All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor?
Okay.
That brings us to our items removed from the consent agenda. There is one item that was previously removed, which is a donation. Tonight we are accepting a donation from the estate of Joan Conklin, who's a retired teacher. She made a donation or her family made a donation of 5 refurbished chairs to the district. Thank you very much for thinking of us. Joe, did you want to say anything about this?
Yes, these were chairs that belong to the district, and we deemed them to no longer have a value, and there's a process for that. And the family took some of the chairs apart and stained them and added some new padding as well as some new wicker seating, and some of the chairs are at the back of our room. The ones that we're not in are the chairs that were donated. So circle of life in terms of district property coming back and getting a little dust up, and we'll certainly be able to use them. So we thank the Conklins for that.
Yes, thank you very much. Can I get a motion to approve this donation, please? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right. All right, that brings us to our first audience comments section. This is the audience comments section for non-agenda items. To maintain an orderly meeting, the board has established the following guidelines for those wishing to address the board. Each speaker should sign in with the district clerk prior to commenting. When called, each speaker should step up to the podium and state their name and affiliation, if applicable, prior to starting their comment. Letters, petitions, or other written material should be handed to the district clerk. Each speaker is permitted 3 minutes for their comments and must be recognized by the board president. All comments must be directed to the board. The board will listen to comments but will not necessarily debate or discuss items. Operational matters will be directed to school administrators for handling. The board is not permitted to address personnel or individual student matters in open session. The board may limit repetitive comments in order to give time to others wishing to speak, as well as to maintain meeting efficiency. If the board, the board expects comments to be made without interference from the audience and in a civil manner. Carmen, did anybody signed up for comments on non-agenda items?
Okay, Mask or no mask? Mask, please. Good evening. My name is Daniela Carrasquillo. I'm back. I'm sorry, but I still have little or no comfort in the grade banding model, even after numerous meetings. The proposed model does not take into account the children that are already in this district. I truly feel like our children will be experiments. On paper, the grade banding model states 2-year transitions, where in reality, there are going to be 1-year transitions. For example, a 4th grader at Frank G. Lindsay will be in 3 different schools in a matter of 15 months. Exiting Frank G. Lindsay in June of 2022, starting Furnace Woods in September of 2022, and then starting Blue Mountain Middle School in September of 2023. My own daughter will leave Furnace Woods to attend Buchanan for Plank for 9 months, and then head back to Furnace Woods for 4th grade. She will just start to learn the lay of the land and the staff before she's out the door again. This is very disruptive and offers no stability for our children. In the June 16th board meeting, Dr. Hillman indicated that research shows that increased transition in the younger grades is detrimental to all students, but particularly those students with the most needs. In other words, English language learners, students with disabilities, special education students, and low socioeconomic status students. As with Dr. Hillman, I too want to know how this is addressed. Has this research been shared and discussed by the board? We heard background conversation after his 3 minutes were up, but we couldn't make out what was being said. So we would like a follow-up and more research provided to the community on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carrasquillo, for your comments. Do we have, it looks like we have another speaker.
She's an on-agenda item as well.
Ms. Irwin, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kristen Irwin. I'm a property owner in the town of Cortland. I wanted to follow up on my discussions with Joe and Dr. Roller about the effects that the changed grade banding will have on our property values. This is regardless of if you're an empty nester, retiree, no kids, kids. Houlihan Lawrence is the largest real estate agency in Westchester. Put out some numbers about comparing the 2020 sales to 2019. Talk about the boost that Westchester saw after many people left New York City in search for their single home family. I'll pass around the article. I'm happy to email it to everyone in the name of saving resources. We see that Croton saw a 19% increase in the 4th quarter of 2020 versus the 4th quarter of 2019. Peak Skills saw a 22% increase in their home earnings, where Ken Head District saw an 8%. Now, if you look at the full year 2019 compared to the full year 2020, Henrik Hudson went down 5% in property value. And judging from the people I met who are filling our rental properties over ask, our rental properties full over ask, their biggest concern was this move to grade banding. And they're saying, we're renting for a year and then we'll decide where we're going to buy. And these numbers show us they're not buying in Hen Head School District. I believe that might be 3 minutes, but I could really go on for a lot longer. So I'll leave it at that. This is a topic that affects us all, as this is our local economy. And I know that we all want a strong local economy, because that's fun restaurants, great shopping, festivals. This town is wonderful. But if we don't have the money to fund it, then people are going to go otherwise.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments on non-agenda items?
No.
Okay, thank you. Next up is our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. A few updates. One is really for the board, but also secondarily our community. So earlier this evening, I sent an email to the board with some dates and times that if you're interested in taking a tour of our facilities to see the impact of the $18.5 million bond that our community overwhelmingly approved back in May of 2018. Please do so. Anthony Merlini is going to spearhead that, and depending on my calendar and Enrique's, we may tag along for the ride. But he'll show you some highlights of the upgrades, particularly the work at the high school and middle school auditoriums, some science rooms, renovated main offices at the elementary school. So we anticipate there'll be about a 90-minute tour highlighting some of those areas. And if we have extra time, we might be able to go to some other places or even see the maintenance facility right outside our back door. So please sign up for those. I think we have 4 or 5 different dates and time slots that Anthony's available. And if you don't get around to it, or your schedule doesn't work with when he's available, we certainly could set up additional times as we get into the fall. So please do that so you can see the hard work and the benefit of our community supporting our school district. The next item is reopening. And I hate to read from my phone, but at 7:11 p.m., I got an update from our State Superintendent's Council. I'm going to read it because I think it's very relevant. So the New York State Superintendent's Council, which represents over 700 school districts in New York State, had a phone call this earlier today with the governor's office. The governor's office stated that because the COVID-19 state of emergency has been rescinded, that was rescinded last spring, the governor's office nor the New York State Department of Health will be issuing guidance to govern the opening of schools next month. That guidance will come from county health officials. So decisions around wearing masks, physical distancing, COVID testing, employee vaccination requirements, those will be left to the local county health departments to make those decisions. And then that will become the law of the land for our school district. Every Monday, we took a little hiatus, but every Monday we now again meet with the county executive and the health department. So I am sure that Monday's meeting is going to be very interesting. It wouldn't surprise me if our county executive or all of those throughout the state heard about this through a similar communication and likely without advance notice. So what we think we know is how we ended the year with reduced social distancing down to 3 feet and mask wearing in school, but not outside of school. What we really need to know, and I'm sure this will be a discussion, my phone will blow up tonight and into the latter part of the week and into the weekend. What we need to know is whether or not we are still mandated to have a screener every morning, whether or not we will still be conducting contact tracing. We don't know the impact on athletics. We don't know if social distancing for lunchtime or snack will be reduced because students were socially distanced in cafeterias or classrooms last year. And we don't know if social distancing beyond 3 feet or within 3 feet would also be entertained. So just reading a couple more highlights from this email. Let's see. The overarching goal from the governor's office that was shared is to have all students in school for in-person learning every day. That is the priority from the governor's office, but they have no way to enforce that. There's also a conversation around requiring teachers or all school personnel to be vaccinated or to subject themselves to regular COVID testing for purposes of employment. That is not a local decision that school districts can make. That would need to come from the state. And so we're not sure if state leaders will take that on or not. But that would, the position of the Superintendent's Council is that in order to enforce that, it should come from legislation directly from the New York State Assembly and Senate, and obviously the governor would need to approve. So some breaking news at 7:11 p.m. We'll provide updates as we receive them, but we're certainly a year after last summer's drip, drip, drip of guidance and news and directives from the state. And here we are on August 4th, we might be revisiting that same experience. So we'll see if we can get with the County Department of Health and the County Executive before Monday, but every Monday at 8:30, we have a Zoom meeting with them. So I'm sure we'll be receiving some more ideas or more guidance. Westchester and many other counties throughout the Hudson Valley and more populous parts of New York State have been identified by the CDC as having appreciable spread and have asked businesses to take certain steps. So whether now or soon, some of the businesses in Westchester County, I'm sure, will be enforcing mask mandates and those sort of things. So the Delta variant is real, and that the data are pretty clear in terms of those that are getting infected and hospitalization rates. And I read earlier today that there's a Delta plus variant. So this is still evolving. So we're certainly not out of it yet, even though we had reason to celebrate in the spring. But it looks like we're going to open school much of the way with that the school year ended. And as soon as we receive some specific updates, we'll share them with our community as soon as possible. Any questions on? Sure.
Has there been any indication on remote learning or having, whether we're doing remote learning classrooms like we did last year for elementary school or hybrid for the middle and high schools? Has there been any word about that?
The word is that we have asked the state education department and the various BOCES throughout New York State to own that, meaning that if there is a remote option, that should not be the responsibility of 700 independent school districts to provide that. Certainly we could coordinate full remote learning for families that are interested with our local BOCES or other agencies throughout the state, and that it would be more of a statewide or regional approach, but not specific to school districts. The other interesting thing with this memo that came out a half hour ago is that the governor was able to use the authority under executive order to make that happen. He was able to suspend and he was able to unilaterally suspend a number of provisions in education law that provided for remote instruction to be equivalent to in-person. Those executive orders also sunset at the end of the school year. So if a remote option were to be made available, it would have to come from the governor, and the governor, at least earlier today, indicated that the executive order in the state of emergency is gone, and that's not an option right now. So we are planning on having everyone in school every day unless executive orders or legislation change.
Any other questions on that?
A little bit more about planning for September. Here we are in August of 21, but planning for the next 13 months, September of 22, as we implement our elementary reorganization. I'll just give some brief updates on what team members have been focused on during at least the last month since school ended, and what to expect in the coming weeks and months. So staff have been identified and have been communicated with and tentatively placed in the elementary school in which they'll work. Some staff are moving this year so that they wouldn't need to move next year. Some staff have decided to stay in their current school, and depending on what the future of retirements or resignations look like, there certainly will be more moving, but everyone has been identified as to where they will be. Classroom assignments are going to take place with the principals. All three principals have visited the schools in which they will be leading. They've done a walkthrough either with Anthony or with the principal of the current school to do some safety protocols and procedures to understand where things are, entry, access, server rooms, technology, security, those sort of things. They're working with Anthony and our custodians to identify which part of the schools will house which grade levels. And with that, we're going to begin the process next week, meeting with Anthony and our custodial staff to scaffold how we will pack and move teachers. The plan and the best practice had been that when certain content and curriculum has been used in the fall and as we limp into the winter, that teachers would be able to box up those materials. We'd be able to identify an interim storage placement and actually move some things throughout the school year, so we wouldn't be waiting for the end of the year. Bus routes, we drafted a handful, a little bit more than a handful of bus routes last spring. Liz and her team are working on the bus routes for the current school year, and after that is completed and communicated to families at the end of August, she'll be working on bus routes for what potential ride times will look like in the Princeton plan. We've identified the longest routes from the two furthest points, regardless of where you live or where you'll be going to school. And those ride times do not exceed, I believe it was either 32 or 35 minutes. So certainly she'll be working throughout the fall and winter to even trim those down a little bit more. Also, as the PTAs in all three elementary schools reorganize, I believe at least 2 of the 3 PTAs will have new leadership in terms of co-presidents. They will begin meeting with their principals at the end of the month to identify a series of opportunities of how they honor the past and prepare for the future as we retire 3 elementary schools that were K-5 and get ready for a new model. So a lot of people think that school districts are sleepy in the summer. That's not the case. Even on our best day, we're very busy with plenty to do, but obviously as we consider reopening and guidance that just was communicated a half hour ago, and obviously the long-term and short-term planning mechanisms for the Princeton plan, we're certainly very busy planning and getting ready. So as we check off some of these tasks, we will provide updates and communication opportunities to our families so they understand where we are. And certainly after we get everyone in the school year, depending on what that looks like in September, we'll be able to re-engage with families in terms of participating in the planning process of, as I said earlier, honoring the past and preparing for the future in terms of our K-5 program.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on that portion of the update? All right, so that brings us to, thank you, Joe. That brings us to our committee reports. You can see on our agenda are the board committee assignments. As you guys know, we've been working on these, and I believe we have a final draft here. There are a couple of committees that only have 2 trustees. You can have a maximum of 3, but you don't have to have 3. 2 is fine. But if there are any committees that only have 2 people and it's something you're interested in and you want to be added to that committee, please feel free. If you want to be an alternate for any of the committees that have 3 trustees already, you can be an alternate. And if someone can't make it to a meeting, then you would be notified and you would be able to go to that meeting and participate in it. So I know I had checked with all of you guys. It seemed like everybody was pretty happy with the way this turned out. I did try to balance it pretty well as far as seniority goes and people's interests and expertise. So if this looks all right to everybody, then we can go ahead and finalize this. All right, any
board?
just for board members.
Oh,
It's on the
Bill's not
agenda.
on it. Bill is not on it. He's leaving his real hard.
What do you mean Bill is not on it?
He's not in audit.
Oh, an
committee.
audit.
Audit
Okay,
committee.
got it. Yeah, I'm
Just
going to
a
be in
comment,
audit
I'm
this year.
sorry. Yeah.
I haven't been on audit with that.
Are you guys muting and unmuting when you're speaking?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so some people have switched around their prior assignments, which is good. You get to be on multiple different committees. I've never been on audit committees, so I get to do that this year. And like I said, if you want to be an alternate or if you want to pick up another committee, just let me know and you'll be added in there. Okay. All right. If nobody has questions or any further comments about that, we can move on to our presentations, and we don't have any presentations tonight. So that brings us to our next audience comment section, which is on the agenda items specifically. The same rules are in effect that I read earlier. I'm not going to read that whole section again. Carmen, was anybody signed up for audience comments on agenda items? Okay, there's nobody this evening having comments on agenda items, so that brings us to our board comments and new business. Does anybody have anything for board comments?
I only have one thing. I would like to make a proposal for a mission statement to change his and her to their. That is the only thing I'm asking.
Okay. I think we're going to be discussing that as we get into strategic planning and looking at the mission statement, et cetera. And strategic planning is going to start in, well, we'll have more details on the timeline as soon as the next meeting in September.
Yep, I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yes.
We had talked about last month about a larger space as that we move into the fall. Do you have an update on that for us, Chuck?
Yeah, so Anthony has looked at some alternative spaces, namely cafeterias and gymnasiums. And any space that we choose outside of here is not going to meet all of our intended needs. And so I think we'll come back with some more detail in terms of a breakdown of each space, potential costs, pros and cons. But I think this group will eventually need to make a decision on whether to leave here or not. All of the spaces that we're identifying, cafeterias, gymnasiums, do not have bathrooms within them. So we would need additional staff to make sure that no one leaves the meeting and wanders around. We also would very likely would, for that reason, may want to stay away from the high school just because there's activity there all of the time. But then again, we're not sure what activities will be permitted to have in person at that time. And we will need to put, we would need to discuss, or the board would need to discuss what their meeting format would want to look like. For example, before we moved here in 2018, the board routinely met in the high school library. And while that was a nice, open, inviting space, to me, that wasn't necessarily conducive to board business, was the feedback. So technology and access to technology, as well as tables, chairs, and making sure it's a comfortable environment for our community members will be a challenge in any other space because it would necessitate setup and breakdown, and we'll be able to put a dollar sign to that. But Anthony's going to zero in on a couple spots. One spot is the gymnasium or cafeteria at Frank G. Another location is the cafetorium at Furnace Woods and BV. And also we had a brief conversation about the middle school gymnasium, but we quickly nixed that just because of audio acoustic concerns. So we'll come back with those spaces identified with more detail in terms of cost out and what the needs and demands would be. We'll involve Greg, of course, to make sure that we have all the technology set up. But that first sort of informal review has been done, and then we'll come back with options. But ultimately, you folks are going to need to decide what kind of meeting setup you'd want to have to conduct your business.
We need to make sure we have plenty of power outlets wherever if we move to, if we're going to continue doing our laptops.
Is it cafetorium or auditoria? No, because I've heard auditoria for most of my FWS life. Which one is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Depending on where you are, I call it the cafeteria auditorium. But
okay.
Yes, they're multi-purpose spaces. In the old days, they used to call them multi-purpose spaces. But all three elementary school cafeteria auditoriums would work, but you know, we would have to discuss, or we'd have to figure out
We need
setup
extra
and breakdown. For
costs.
example, it works at BV and Furnace Woods because of the risers. At Frank G, you know, the more central spot, of course, wouldn't necessarily work because we would need to import tables and chairs and those sort of things. Even the Frank G PTA meets and everyone sits on the, you know, hard, uncomfortable cafeteria tables that have the seats embedded in them, and that's not comfortable. But it's really going to come down to our meeting format. Again, we're using Zoom to try to improve the quality for folks at home and watching on YouTube. It's going to come down to what sort of production, what space can offer us the best production and is most conducive for you folks to conduct business.
But there's a more significant cost in going to any of these spaces
100%.
because we have to increase security and there's cleanup and there's more technology involved. And is it really better? And we still haven't heard anything back from NISBA on open meetings law, correct?
We won't be hearing anything from them until there's a vote, which will be at the annual meeting in October. So it's going to be a while before we hear back from them on that.
The speed of state education.
And legislation has to change too. We just propose it and then state legislation would have to change to allow us to make that change in the open meeting law. It's a state law.
I think we need the data though. I think we need to be prepared to discuss and make a decision on that first meeting in September, because we are getting back to school and public interest is going to be picking up. So we need to have the data, we need to have the information, and we all need to be prepared to discuss and make a decision so that and then in 2 weeks we could be prepared to move if that's what we come to a decision as. That was what I was asking. Thank you.
Any other new business board comments? All right, can I get a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That concludes our meeting. Our next meeting is actually scheduled for September 1st, barring any unforeseen circumstances in the meanwhile. So